Usually, when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this underlying expectation of precision, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like it's a hard science.
Yeah, exactly. It's like engineering. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points at the illuminated film and says, well, there it is. That's the problem.
Clean and simple.
Right. But then you step into the world of human psychology, personality disorders, high conflict relationships, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just fundamentally broken.
It really is. The picture is completely blurry.
It is. And you find yourself dealing with someone whose behavior is endlessly dramatic or honestly just maliciously cruel, and you're lying awake at night wondering, like, am I going crazy? Is it me?
Which is such a common feeling.
It's terrible. Well, I'm here to assure you, the listener, right at the top of this deep dive, you aren't crazy. You've likely just collided with the 10% of the population that author Bill Eddy identifies as having a high conflict personality.
And that 10% statistic, I mean, that is staggering when you actually sit with it.
It's massive.
Yeah. We are looking at a really fascinating manual today. It's Eddy's 5 types of people who can ruin your life. And it basically attempts to map out this exact murky territory. Because, to your point about the x-ray machine, the damage these individuals do, it isn't visible on a scan.
Right, there's no physical proof right away.
Exactly. It happens in the messy, invisible space of human connection. But the destruction, to careers, to families, to bank accounts, it is incredibly real.
It really is. And we aren't just going to give you a surface-level summary today. For every single one of the 5 personality types we cover, we are taking a highly structured analytical approach.
We want to give you the most rigorous breakdown possible.
Exactly. So for each type, we're going to dig into the core premise of how their brain works. Then the conceptual link connecting them to the broader high conflict pattern.
Right.
Then we'll look at the actual evidence and case studies from the text, followed by a critical observation. Because, we aren't just taking the author's word as gospel here.
We definitely have some pushback on a few things.
Oh, for sure. And finally, we'll wrap each one up with a concrete main takeaway. But before we get into the 5 specific types, we have to talk about why we are all so uniquely vulnerable to these people right now. I mean, why does this feel like an epidemic?
Well, it's essentially a perfect storm of modern cultural shifts. If you think back to human history, we lived in close-knit, geographically fixed communities, right?
Like small villages.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
In a village, gossip actually acted as a social immune system.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it.
Right, because if there was someone who constantly lied or manipulated or flew into unprovoked rages, the community knew.
Everyone knew. You couldn't hide it.
Exactly. You were warned before you ever did business with them or dated them.
Yeah.
But today, we are highly mobile. We are constantly meeting strangers online, starting new jobs in new cities, swiping on dating apps.
And it's all entirely stripped of historical context.
Yes, we have no social immune system left.
So we're basically walking into a minefield blindfolded.
Pretty much, yeah.
And it doesn't help that our entertainment culture totally normalizes this. Think about every reality TV show or even prestige dramas.
Oh, they love toxic characters.
They do. We watch these shows where an absolute sociopath is celebrated for being, like, cunning, or the incredibly toxic partner has this magical change of heart in the 3rd act because they finally learned how to love,
Right, the classic redemption arc.
Exactly. It trains us to expect a redemption arc in real life that, frankly, is never coming.
It's so true. And honestly, the most insidious vulnerability is our own biology.
Wait, really? Our biology?
Yeah, we are a pro-social species. We are biologically wired to trust people who play in our emotions. When someone comes to you crying or playing the victim, your mirror neurons literally fire.
Your brain is telling you to help them.
Your biological imperative is to soothe and help them. And high conflict people, whether consciously or unconsciously, they hack that exact biological wiring. They basically weaponize your empathy against you.
Wow, they're empathy hackers. That is a chilling way to frame it. Okay, so let's establish the foundation here. Let's look at the core premise of what a high conflict personality, or an HCP, actually is.
Let's do it.
So the text argues that around 10% of the population has an HCP, which is often combined with a cluster B personality disorder. And they are driven by 4 inescapable pillars: all or nothing thinking, unmanaged emotions, extreme behavior, and a relentless preoccupation with blaming others.
And that last one is the most critical.
Well, blaming others.
Yeah, what Eddy calls the target of blame.
Right. Think of an HCP as an emotional heat-seeking missile. They lock onto a target of blame, and they cannot deviate from that destructive path no matter what logic, reason, or evidence you try to apply.
I want to pause on that missile analogy for a second because the actual mechanics of how a heat-seeking missile works is crucial here.
Yeah, okay, break it down.
Well, a missile doesn't care about the collateral damage,
Right.
right? It doesn't care if it blows up a hospital to reach its target. It only cares about the heat signature.
Right.
For the HCP, that heat signature is the person they have decided is entirely 100% responsible for their internal emotional distress.
So it could be anyone.
Anyone. A spouse, a boss, a neighbor. But once that lock is established, you cannot reason with the missile. You can't stand in front of it and explain that you actually aren't the source of the heat.
Because it doesn't care about facts. Which brings up the conceptual link we need to establish before we dive into the specific types. How does an HCP operate differently from a normal person who is just having a terrible day?
That's the big question. Because, I mean, I get angry. I blame people sometimes. We all do. How do we differentiate the underlying mechanics here?
The difference lies in the fact that for an HCP, the issue is never actually the issue.
What do you mean by that?
Normally, if you and I have a disagreement, say a project at work is behind schedule, we focus on the problem, we look at the timeline, we compromise, we might get a little frustrated, but we resolve it.
Right, we fix the schedule. Exactly. But with an HCP, the delayed project is merely the stage setting. The real event is their opportunity to escalate the conflict. It's their chance to unleash their unmanaged emotions and attack their target of blame.
So the conflict itself is the goal.
Yes, the conflict is the point. It's how they regulate their internal chaos. If you try to solve the project delay using logic, they will just move the goalposts.
Because they don't actually want the project fixed.
No, because logic isn't what they're seeking. They're seeking a vessel for their blame.
Man. And the evidence the author provides for how widespread this is, it should give everyone pause. 10% of humanity. In North America alone, that's over 35 million people.
It's not a fringe issue.
Not at all. You don't just know one of these people. Statistically, you interact with several of them regularly, and the text gives us a fascinating heuristic to spot them, the 90% rule.
I love this rule.
It's so helpful. It posits that if a person does something extremely negative that 90% of people would never do, it is a glaring, flashing red warning sign.
It's a brilliant way to cut through our own cognitive dissonance.
Because we're always making excuses, right?
Constantly. We say, oh, he screamed at the barista because he's going through a tough divorce.
Right, giving them the benefit of the doubt.
But the 90% rule forces you to pause and ask, wait, if I put 100 random people in the exact same situation, going through a tough divorce, would 90 of them scream in a barista's face?
No, they definitely wouldn't.
Exactly. The extreme behavior is the tell. The book uses the example of someone faking a house fire to get sympathy donations.
Oh, that was wild.
Right. 90% of people, even if they're dead broke and desperate, they do not fake a catastrophic fire.
But I have a critical observation here, and I want to push back on Eddie's framework a bit. Are we over-pathologizing normal human conflict?
That's a fair question.
I just worry that if we adopt this 10% lens too rigidly, we start diagnosing everyone who annoys us or everyone who raises their voice as an unredeemable HCP. I mean, we've all engaged in all-or-nothing thinking when we're exhausted, right?
It's a very valid critique. The danger of any psychological framework is weaponizing it.
Exactly.
The author kind of assumes these traits are rigidly fixed in this 10%. But that perspective ignores how acute environmental stressors can perfectly mimic HCP behavior.
Give me an example.
Well, imagine someone living in deep systemic poverty, someone constantly facing eviction, or someone who has just experienced a traumatic, sudden loss.
Their nervous system is just absolutely fried.
Completely fried. They might exhibit extreme emotions, intense paranoia, and all-or-nothing thinking. They might even unfairly lash out at a social worker or a family member.
Right, because they are pushed beyond their limits.
Exactly. But they are permanently an HCP. They are a normal human reacting to an abnormal, crushing environment.
So the risk of Eddie's book is that it might encourage us to slap a permanent label on someone who is just acutely suffering.
That's the blind spot, yeah.
That's a really vital distinction. We're looking for an inflexible, lifelong pattern, not a stress response to a terrible life event. So if we synthesize this foundational understanding, the main takeaway is this. Recognizing the underlying pattern of a high-conflict personality, rather than just reacting to the surface-level argument, is your first line of defense against becoming a target of blame.
Precisely. You have to learn to see the matrix of the behavior, not just the words coming out of their mouth.
Okay, let's get into the specifics. Let's look at the first of the 5 types, The narcissistic HCP.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. We hear the word narcissist thrown around constantly on TikTok and social media. Usually it just means like my ex who was selfish.
Right, it's lost a lot of its clinical meaning.
Exactly. But the core premise of a narcissistic high conflict personality is much darker. They are driven by a deep, agonizing terror of being disrespected or seen as inferior.
It's all about avoiding that feeling of inferiority.
Right. And to compensate for this internal void, they demand constant admiration, act incredibly entitled, and ruthlessly insult or sabotage others to maintain their illusion of superiority.
It's a full-time job for them.
I picture it like a massive, ornate hot air balloon, but it has a tiny hole in the canvas. It requires the constant blazing hot air of other people's praise to stay afloat. And if you dare to point out the hole, they will drop an anvil on your head.
It's a really good visual, but let's take it a step further to really understand the mechanics.
Okay.
That hot air balloon is entirely dependent on the weather. And for the narcissist, you are the weather.
Oh, I see.
If you aren't actively blowing hot air into their balloon, if you are just neutral, they start to sink. And sinking feels like death to them.
So neutrality is basically an attack to them.
Exactly. Their superiority isn't stable. They don't just want to be great. They fundamentally need you to be nothing in comparison.
Wow. Which perfectly explains the conceptual link to the broader HCP framework. We know HCPs need a target of blame. The narcissist uses blame specifically as a tool for downward social comparison.
It's a zero-sum game for them.
Your degradation is the literal fuel for their elevation. So if a project fails at work, they can't just fix it. They have to publicly crucify you for it. Because proving you are incompetent proves they are the genius surrounded by idiots.
And the evidence the book provides for this is really chilling. According to a 2008 NIH study, over 6% of the general population has narcissistic personality disorder.
6%. That is a lot of people.
It really is. And Eddie makes a fascinating distinction between vulnerable and grandiose narcissists.
What's the difference?
Well, when they suffer what's called a narcissistic injury, which is basically any time you expose a weakness, set a boundary, or catch them in a lie, the vulnerable narcissist explodes with immediate, terrifying rage.
Like a toddler throwing a tantrum.
Exactly. They throw the tantrum right there. But the grandiose narcissist, they are much more dangerous.
Really? How so?
They might stay perfectly calm in the moment, they'll smile, but they will quietly plot a delayed, highly calculated revenge campaign to destroy your reputation months later.
That is terrifying. The book actually highlights a case study that really illustrates how fast this switch flips. There's a TV host in the book named Jason.
The Jason story.
Yeah. He was incredibly charming to a young job seeker named Jen. They had a great introductory chat. He gave her this intense, overly intimate hug and asked her out for drinks.
Which is already crossing a line.
Totally. But Jen politely texted back saying she'd love a friendly meetup and hoped he could offer some career advice. She set a perfectly normal, professional boundary.
Which is what you should do.
Right. But Jason completely snapped. He viciously canceled the meeting via text, acting entirely offended that she would dare to, quote-unquote, use him for a job.
Look at the mechanics of what happened there, though. Jen just asked for a favor as a professional peer. But to a narcissistic HCP, treating them like a peer is an intolerable insult.
Because it means you aren't beneath them.
Exactly. He didn't want a peer. He wanted an adoring, subservient fan. So when she established a boundary, it punctured the hot air balloon.
And the text notes that Jason was later fired and arrested for sexually assaulting multiple women at the station.
It's a textbook application of the 90% rule.
Oh, for sure. 90% of people do not give intense, lingering hugs to a stranger they just met professionally, and they certainly don't respond with vicious insults when asked for a coffee chat.
Absolutely not.
But wait, I have to stop you there because I have a major critical observation about the advice the book gives here.
Okay, let's hear it.
Eddie basically advises disengaging from these people and never, ever criticizing a narcissist. Just walk away.
Yeah, the avoidance strategy.
But frankly, that ignores a massive systemic issue in our society. Modern corporate culture frequently rewards grandiose narcissism. The advice to just avoid them is an immense privilege.
That's a really sharp point.
What if that narcissist signs your paycheck? What if they are your department head? Many employees simply do not have the economic power to just walk away from a narcissistic boss.
That is the glaring limitation of this entire behavioral framework.
Yeah.
It places the burden of management entirely on the individual victim, rather than critiquing the structures that elevate these people to power in the first place.
Right.
I mean, in many Fortune 500 companies, the ruthless, empathy-lacking visionary who steals credit and crushes rivals, they're celebrated. They are promoted.
They get on the cover of magazines.
Exactly. If your CEO is a narcissistic HCP, avoiding criticism might keep you off their radar, but it forces you into a state of permanent subjugation. It doesn't solve the fact that our capitalist systems often incentivize and protect this exact pathology.
Exactly. Just avoid the CEO isn't a viable career strategy if you have a mortgage to pay. But if we are focusing purely on individual survival, the lesson is clear. The main takeaway here is never publicly humiliate a narcissist or try to prove them wrong, as their drive to protect their fragile superiority will ensure you become a lifelong target of their revenge.
It is purely about self-preservation. Even if you have the receipts, even if you can definitively prove they are lying in a meeting, doing it publicly is essentially painting a bullseye on your own back.
You might win the battle of facts, but you will trigger a war of annihilation.
Exactly. It's just not worth it.
All right, let's pivot to a completely different emotional engine. Let's look at the borderline HCP. The core premise here is fundamentally different from the narcissist.
Very different.
While the narcissist fears disrespect, borderline HCPs are terrified of abandonment. It is a primal existential dread. To cope with this, they swing violently between intense, smothering affection and vicious, vindictive rage.
It's exhausting for everyone involved.
And they engage in a psychological defense mechanism called splitting.
Yes, splitting is a huge concept here.
This means they categorize people as either all good, flawless angels or all bad, evil demons. There is no middle ground. There are no flawed humans in their world. I think of it like riding a roller coaster with someone, but midway through the loop, the safety harness suddenly turns into a straitjacket, and the person operating the ride blames you for screaming.
Okay, I see the roller coaster analogy, but let's look at why that safety harness actually turns into a straitjacket.
Okay, why does it happen?
It happens because of how they perceive independence.
Right.
If you show any signs of autonomy, like if you go out with your friends, if you don't text back immediately, their brain interprets that not as, oh, they are busy. It interprets it as, they are leaving me forever and I am going to die alone.
That sounds terrifying.
It is. The conceptual link here is that the borderline HCP's intensity is rooted entirely in attachment, not ego. The narcissist attacks you to feel superior. The borderline attacks you as a desperate, dysregulated attempt to control you so you can't leave.
But it's this tragic paradox, right? Because their methods, the screaming, the baseless accusations, it causes the exact abandonment they are so terrified of.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And the evidence for this is incredibly sad. The NIH study cited in the book shows about 5.9% of the population has borderline personality disorder. And the text gives us the story of Tom and Kara.
Oh, this story's rough.
It's brutal. They met, and Kara initiated this incredibly intense, instantaneous intimacy. She pushed for them to be engaged and married within 2 months.
Which is incredibly fast.
Right. And Tom was swept off his feet. He thought he'd met his soulmate. But 3 years later, the switch flipped. Kara kicked Tom out, filed a restraining order based on completely fabricated allegations of abuse, and launched a 7-year court battle over their child.
Tom's story is the classic too good to be true trap.
It really is.
The book notes that rapid boundary pushing and instant intimacy are the earliest warning signs of a borderline HCP. Think about the 90% rule again. 90% of people do not pressure a partner into marriage after 8 weeks of dating.
Definitely not.
But Tom was caught in the idealization phase of splitting. He was categorized as the all-good savior.
And you can't live up to that.
No. The problem is, nobody can perfectly regulate another person's internal anxieties 24/7. The moment Tom failed to be a perfect mind-reading savior, maybe he came home late, maybe he disagreed with her, he was instantly split into the all-bad demon.
Wow.
And because HCPs rely on extreme behaviors, Carr didn't just ask for an amicable divorce. She used the family court system as a weapon to completely obliterate him.
But reading this section, my critical observation is just one of profound sadness.
Yeah, it's a very heavy chapter.
It is so easy to demonize the borderline HCP based on Carr's actions. But we can't gloss over the immense, agonizing internal suffering of the borderline individual.
It is an absolute tragedy. The text focuses really heavily on protecting the target, which of course is practical and necessary for a survival manual. But it doesn't spend much time on the neuroscience of the borderline experience.
What's happening in their brain?
Their amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain, is hyper-reactive. They aren't acting this way just to be manipulative or malicious. They are experiencing an internal emotional firestorm.
So it's real to them.
Very real. Their brain is genuinely perceiving a late text message as a life or death threat of abandonment. They have no internal tools to extinguish that fire, so they project it outward onto you. They are prisoners of their own dysregulated nervous systems.
That's just heartbreaking. But empathy doesn't mean you should let someone destroy your life or take your children from you. You have to protect yourself.
Absolutely.
So the main takeaway for dealing with this type is, you must forcefully slow down new relationships that feel too good to be true to reveal the borderline HCP's hidden pendulum of extreme mood swings before you get legally or emotionally trapped.
Time is the ultimate truth serum for a borderline HCP.
How long can they hide it?
They can maintain the all-good idealized mask for a few months, maybe up to a year. But if you enforce normal pacing, if you say, I really like you, but I'm not moving in after 3 months, the mask will eventually slip.
The unmanaged emotions will surface.
Exactly. You just have to make sure you see them before you share a bank account or sign a lease.
All right, from the tragic to the terrifying, let's move to the antisocial HCP, what we commonly call the sociopath.
This is where things get really cold.
Yeah. The core premise here is chillingly simple. They are driven by a singular need to dominate and deceive others. They completely lack remorse. They view societal rules, empathy, and morals not as guiding principles, but as predictable vulnerabilities in other people that can be exploited for their own gain or amusement.
They see our empathy as a weakness to exploit.
Exactly. Imagine sitting down to play a game of chess with someone, focusing on your strategy, only to realize half an hour later that they aren't playing chess at all. They're just distracting you with the pieces while they steal your wallet and quietly set the board on fire.
They are playing an entirely different game.
Right. And the conceptual link that separates them from the other types is intent.
Intent is everything here.
We just talked about how the borderline HCP is drowning in emotion, but the antisocial HCP is chillingly detached. Their extreme behavior isn't an emotional reaction, it's a predatory strategy.
Right. They use high conflict behavior intentionally to confuse, disorient, and exhaust you until you submit to their dominance.
And the evidence here blows my mind because we're not just talking about psychology anymore. We were talking about measurable physiology.
This is the wildest part of the book to me.
It's crazy. The author points out that antisocial individuals make up about 3.6% of the population. But here is the terrifying part. Their heart rates actually slow down during conflict.
Let's unpack the autonomic nervous system's role in that because it's vital.
Yeah, please explain that.
For a normal person, confrontation triggers the sympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
Your heart races, your palms sweat, adrenaline floods your system. You are in fight or flight.
You're panicked.
Exactly. But for the antisocial HCP, the confrontation soothes them. Their heart rate drops. They become calmer, more focused.
That's basically a superpower in an argument.
It gives them a massive biological advantage in a fight, whether it's a physical altercation or a boardroom negotiation. They are maintaining a cool, calculated head while you are biologically panicking. This is why they are such incredible risk takers. They literally don't feel the physiological fear that keeps the rest of us in check.
They are biological predators. The book highlights a guy named Paul. He was a reformed armed robber who joined a church.
Oh, the Paul story.
Yeah. He was incredibly charming, volunteered for everything, and quickly gained the congregation's trust. Then he started circulating these devastating photos of a burning house, claiming his faraway cousin lost everything in a tragic fire, and he aggressively begged for donations.
And look at how he manipulated the group dynamics there. He totally split the congregation. Half the people defended him fiercely because he had charmed them, and the other half suspected it was a con.
Creating chaos.
Total chaos. Eventually, a local journalist proved the photos were completely fake, just pulled off the internet.
Unbelievable.
Paul didn't care about the church community or the religious aspect. He just saw an environment full of trusting, highly empathetic people who were conditioned to be charitable. He saw a room full of perfect marks.
But I want to push back on Eddie's focus here. My critical observation is that the text heavily implies you can spot an antisocial HCP by looking for this too-good-to-be-true charm or seduction or elaborate sob stories.
Right, the con artist archetype.
Yeah. I think that leaves a massive, dangerous blind spot for the reader. It entirely ignores the overtly thuggish, uncharismatic sociopaths. Not every antisocial person is a smooth-talking con artist like Ted Bundy or Frank Abagnale.
That is a phenomenal point. The charming con artist is really only one flavor of antisocial behavior. The book biases toward the deceptive sociopath, probably because they're the ones who catch us off guard.
Right, they trick us.
But what about the sheer brute force sociopath? The guy who isn't charming at all, but just uses relentless intimidation, physical presence, and unvarnished fear to dominate a household or a workplace.
You see that a lot in bad management.
Exactly. You don't need to look for a sob story to spot them. You just need to listen to your own fear response. They don't hide their dominance. They revel in it.
Right, if your boss enjoys terrifying the interns, he might not be a con artist, but he's still antisocial.
100%.
Still, for the deceptive ones that sneak past our defenses, the book offers a clear warning. The main takeaway is, beware of highly charming individuals who share extreme victim stories combined with urgent requests for your help, as this is the antisocial HCP's most effective hook.
Urgency is the key word there. Urgency is the con artist's best friend.
Like act now or disaster strike.
Exactly. My cousin's house burned down. We need the money tonight. They create a false time constraint, so your critical thinking brain doesn't have time to verify the facts. Always verify before you trust, especially when empathy and urgency are being weaponized together.
Okay, we have two more personality types to cover, and we're going to group them together because they share a unique mechanism. Let's look at the paranoid and histrionic HCPs.
These two are fascinating when paired together.
They really are. The core premise here is that both of these types operate on massive, almost hallucinatory distortions of reality. Paranoid HCPs are consumed by an unrelenting fear of betrayal. They believe everyone is conspiring against them, so they launch preemptive attacks against imagined enemies.
Like attacking before they get attacked.
Right. Histrionic HCPs, on the other hand, are terrified of being ignored. They manufacture dramatic, exaggerated crises to ensure they remain the absolute center of attention.
It's all about the spotlight for them.
To use an analogy, the paranoid HCP is a panicked radar operator firing live missiles at a flock of geese because they are convinced they are enemy stealth bombers. The histrionic HCP is a human fire alarm that pulls its own lever and screams every time someone burns a piece of toast.
Those analogies perfectly capture the hyperreactivity of both types. Everything is a level 10 emergency.
But the conceptual link here is fascinating when you compare them to the first three types.
How so?
Well, the narcissist, the borderline, and the antisocial HCPs manipulate you directly. They attack your ego, your attachment, or your resources. The paranoid and histrionic types are different. They manipulate the environment to validate their internal anxieties.
I see.
They aren't necessarily trying to control you specifically as an individual. They are trying to force the entire world to conform to their internal delusions of grand conspiracies or epic tragedies. You are just a prop in their play.
That makes a lot of sense. And the evidence the text provides shows how disruptive this can be in a professional setting. Paranoid individuals make up about 4.4% of the population.
And they love targeting big organizations, right?
They do. They often target large institutions, government agencies, or authority figures. The book gives the example of Monica.
What did she do?
She was an employee who seemed perfect on paper. But soon, she began filing these incredibly detailed, completely fabricated harassment claims.
Made-up claims.
Yeah. She alleged that her coworkers were following her home, and that her boss, Joe, was actively sabotaging her computer to make her look incompetent. She eventually sued the company for massive discrimination.
Wow. Was any of it real?
None of it. The catch, she genuinely believed it. It wasn't a calculated con like Paul at the church. Her brain was actually generating these conspiracies.
That is wild.
And then you have the histrionic individuals, making up about 1.8% of the population. They use highly exaggerated theatrical speech to pull people in. They will spread devastating rumors or claim to be the victim of massive dramatic injustices just to keep everyone emotionally engaged with them.
Just to keep eyes on them.
Exactly. It's an addiction to attention, regardless of whether that attention is positive or negative.
Wait, I have to jump in here with a very serious critical observation. When I read the section on Monica and her harassment claims, alarm bells went off for me.
Oh, absolutely. Me too.
Think about the corporate application of this. If an employee comes to an HR department in tears, saying they are being harassed or stalked by a coworker, we are socially and legally obligated to believe them and investigate, right?
This is the darkest, most dangerous potential application of Eddie's framework. The risk of misidentifying a genuine victim or a courageous whistleblower is massive. Yeah. Imagine a toxic corporate HR department getting their hands on this book.
Yeah.
An employee comes forward to report genuine systemic sexual harassment. The HR rep, wanting to protect the company, looks at the employee, who is understandably highly emotional, maybe crying, maybe sounding a little paranoid, because they are actively being hunted in the workplace.
And what does the HR rep say?
They say, extreme emotions,
Mm.
elaborate stories. She must be a histrionic or paranoid HCP. They could easily weaponize this psychological framework to discredit the victim and cover up actual abuse.
They pathologize the victim's entirely justified distress. That is a terrifying thought. Because if someone is actually being stalked or harassed, they will sound paranoid. They will be highly emotional.
It's the normal reaction to an abnormal situation.
We cannot use this framework as a convenient excuse to dismiss inconvenient truths. We have to investigate the facts independently, completely separate from the emotional presentation of the person making the claim.
Exactly. The framework is a tool for understanding behavior. It is not an absolute verdict on the truth. You must rely on objective evidence. Did the emails happen? Is there camera footage? You can't just say, well, she's crying too much, she's an HCP.
Which perfectly sets up how we should interact with these two types safely. The main takeaway is, do not overly engage with the paranoid's conspiracy theories or the histrionic's theatrical dramas, as your participation only validates and fuels their distorted reality.
You have to become a completely neutral observer.
How do you do that?
Well, if a paranoid HCP tells you the CIA is hacking their phone, do not agree with them. That validates the delusion. But crucially, do not fiercely argue with them either.
Don't try to prove them wrong.
Don't pull out your phone and try to prove the CIA doesn't care about them. Because the moment you argue against the conspiracy, their brain automatically categorizes you as part of the conspiracy.
Oh, you become an enemy.
Right. You just say, wow, that sounds really stressful, and you change the subject.
Okay, we've mapped the minefield, we've identified all 5 threats, now we need the defusal tools. Let's dive into the final section. The defense playbook.
This is the practical part.
Yes. The core premise here is that to survive an HCP, you must fundamentally override your natural human instincts. Your instinct is to reason with them. Your instinct is to defend your character when they accuse you of something horrible. Your instinct is to argue facts.
Which is what you do with a normal person.
Right. But you have to stop all of that. Instead, you have to use structured techniques to evaluate them, which Eddie calls the WEB method, and manage them, which he calls the CARS method.
WB and cars.
Dealing with an HCP is like trying to defuse a live bomb. You can't use a hammer out of anger, and you can't wrap your arms around it in a hug out of appeasement. You have to use very specific, precise, emotionally detached tools to snip the exact right wires.
Because if you use your normal conflict resolution tools, the bomb detonates.
Give me an example of that.
If you say, okay, I'm sorry, I'll take the blame for this just to keep the peace, the HCP doesn't think, oh, what a nice person.
What do they think?
They think, they admitted fault. They are the villain. You just gave them infinite ammunition. And if you try to explain your side logically with a spreadsheet, they feel patronized and escalate their rage.
It's a lose-lose situation.
It really is.
The conceptual link here is that having identified the specific pathologies, the narcissist's ego, the borderline's fear, the sociopath's dominance, this section provides the universal toolkit required to neutralize all of them.
It's the universal antidote.
It also helps neutralize the negative advocates they recruit.
The negative advocates.
A negative advocate is a well-meaning friend, HR rep, or family member that the HCCP has completely fooled into fighting their battles for them.
Flying monkeys, basically. Let's break down the evidence and the actual mechanics of these tools, starting with the WB method. This is how you spot them before you get entangled. WEB.
Okay, what do those stand for?
Words, emotions, behavior. Are their words highly extreme, all or nothing, and constantly blaming others? Check your own emotions around them. Do you feel a sudden, inexplicable spike of fear? Do you feel utterly exhausted after a 5-minute conversation?
I know exactly that feeling.
Or conversely, do you feel intensely swept off your feet in an unnatural way? Finally, behavior. Are they violating the 90% rule?
Once your WB analysis confirms you are dealing with an HCP, you transition to the CARS method to manage them. Connect, analyze, respond, and set limits.
And the author spends a lot of time explaining the neuroscience of why this works.
Yeah, let's get into the brain science of it.
So, HCPs are essentially trapped in the right hemisphere of their brain, specifically the amygdala. This is the reactive, emotional fight-or-flight crisis center.
It's all emotion, no logic.
Exactly. You literally cannot process logic with the right brain. The CARS method is designed to gently soothe that right brain panic, just enough to coax their cognitive processing over to the prefrontal cortex in the left brain, where logical problem-solving actually happens.
Let's walk through how that soothing actually works in practice. The C is connect.
Right. You don't agree with their crazy accusations, but you offer basic empathy. Like you say, I can see how frustrated you are about this project.
Just a little validation.
That tiny bit of validation lowers the right brain threat level. Then A is analyze. You give them a choice. You say, we can either extend the deadline by a week or we can cut feature X. Which do you prefer?
Why a choice?
Giving them a choice forces their brain to shift to the left hemisphere to evaluate those options.
Oh, that's clever. And the R is respond. This is where Eddie introduces the BIFF communication style. Brief, informative, friendly, and firm. This is crucial for emails and texts.
BIFF is a lifesaver.
If an HCP sends you a 10-page email calling you a monster, you do not write 10 pages back defending yourself. You write 3 sentences. Thanks for letting me know your concerns. The report was filed on Tuesday at 4 p.m. as requested. Have a great weekend.
No defensiveness. No apologies.
No counterattacks, just bland, impenetrable, factual statements. And finally, the us is set limits. You say, I will not respond to emails containing profanity. If you continue, I will block this address.
It sounds so clean when we describe it.
It does sound easy on paper.
But I know you have a critical observation here about the reality of actually executing this.
I do. When I read about the CARS method, my immediate visceral reaction was, this is incredibly exhausting.
It's a massive cognitive load.
Look at what is happening here. This framework places the entire burden of emotional regulation and conflict de-escalation squarely on the victim.
Totally.
It requires the target of the abuse to suppress their own valid anger, ignore the injustice of the situation, and act like a highly trained, entirely unfeeling hostage negotiator for the person who is actively trying to ruin their life.
Which is inherently deeply unfair.
It is profoundly unfair.
The text essentially demands an incredibly high level of emotional labor from the victim, while expecting zero accountability or growth from the abuser.
You just have to eat it.
You have to swallow your pride. You have to let them think they are right, and you have to meticulously manage their emotional state just to survive the workday.
It's awful.
It's important to frame CARS correctly. It is a survival tactic. It is not a justice mechanism.
Right. You won't get a neat resolution.
You will not get closure. You will not get an apology. You are just managing a wild animal so you don't get bitten.
It's basically emotional martial arts. You aren't fighting back. You are just deflecting their energy into the void so you can escape out the back door.
That's exactly what it is.
Which brings us to the final, overriding lesson of the entire book. The main takeaway is, your ultimate defense against any high-conflict person is radical self-awareness and the strict refusal to play by their emotional rules, utilizing brief, firm, and emotionally detached communication.
Refusing to play their game is the only way to win. Do not defend yourself. Do not explain yourself.
It's hard not to, though.
It is so hard, but you cannot try to make them see the light. Set the limit, be incredibly boring, and walk away.
So, what does this all mean as we zoom out? As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm just struck by how empowering it is to finally have the vocabulary for this.
It names the invisible problem.
To have the WE and CARS methods to understand the sheer baffling chaos that this 10% of the population can cause. We don't have to be blindly stumbling through the dark anymore, wondering why our perfectly logical, rational arguments are completely failing to get through to our borderline ex-partner or our narcissistic boss.
Knowledge really is the flashlight here.
It really is.
But I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's drawn from the HCP theory presented at the very end of the text. The author posits a fascinating evolutionary question.
Oh, I love this part.
These high conflict traits, right? The
Yeah.
ruthless, remorseless aggression of the antisocial, the extreme hypervigilance of the paranoid, the commanding, unshakable grandiosity of the narcissist. These cause destruction today. But what if they were actually evolutionary advantages in times of ancient tribal warfare?
Right. If your tribe is being attacked by a neighboring village, you don't want an empathetic mediator leading your warriors.
No, you don't.
You want the sociopath. You want the guy whose heart rate slows down while everyone else is panicking. You want the paranoid guy who hasn't slept in 3 days, standing watch at the gate.
Exactly. In a brutal life-or-death ancient environment, the HCP was the apex protector.
Wow.
But if that is true, what does it say about the architecture of our modern society?
That's the terrifying part.
Look at our algorithm-driven social media platforms. Twitter and Facebook literally run on algorithms that prioritize and monetize outrage, all-or-nothing thinking, and extreme behavior.
It's rewarding the HCP behavior.
Exactly. And look at our hyper-competitive corporate environments that reward ruthless dominance and lack of empathy with massive stock options. Are we inadvertently building systems that incentivize and resurrect the ancient high-conflict personality?
We're bringing them back to the top.
Are we effectively turning our peacetime society back into an emotional war zone, where the HCP is once again the apex predator?
That is a massive, heavy thought to end on. Because if the environment rewards the pathology won't stay at 10%. It will spread.
It'll just keep growing.
Remember at the very beginning of the show, we talked about that medical x-ray? How a broken bone is clean and visible and easy to diagnose?
The jagged white line.
Yeah. The damage a high-conflict personality does will never be visible on an x-ray. It's invisible, it's insidious, and it happens in the darkest, murkiest corners of human relationships.
But now we know what to look for.
Yes. Now, hopefully, you have the blueprint to see it coming. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay radically self-aware, trust those initial gut feelings when someone violates the 90% rule, and above all else, protect your peace.